There comes a moment in every deep human connection when illusion collapses and truth quietly enters the space between two people. Most individuals believe love begins when someone notices beauty, kindness, or strength. But Carl Jung suggested something deeper than that. He believed real connection begins when the masks people wear start to fall away. At the beginning of a relationship, people do not fully meet each other. They meet fragments, they meet impressions, they meet appearances, small behaviors, and emotional signals that the mind quickly tries to interpret. In that early stage, your soulmate does not see the full truth of who you are. They see pieces of you, and then their mind fills the gaps with assumptions. This is how projection begins. A person unconsciously places their own desires, fears, and unfinished emotional needs onto another human being. Without realizing it, they start creating an internal image of who you are. That image feels real to them, even though it is partly constructed from their imagination. At first, this projection creates a strong sense of certainty. It feels like understanding. It feels like emotional clarity. But over time, reality slowly begins to show itself. And when reality starts to appear, the image they created in their mind begins to break. When your soulmate begins to discover the deeper truth about you, something shifts inside them. They realize you were never just the simple version they imagined. You were not just the emotions they assumed, or the personality they quickly labeled. You were far more layered, more complex, and more human than their initial understanding allowed. They start to see that your silence was never weakness. Your distance was not rejection. Your mystery was not confusion. Slowly, their interpretation of you begins to change. They begin to understand that what they once misread actually had meaning beneath the surface. They may remember moments where you seemed distant, and now they see you were simply protecting your inner world. They may recall times when you stayed quiet, and now they realize that silence carried thought, reflection, and emotional depth they never noticed. They may think back to situations where they judged you too quickly, and now those same moments feel completely different. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries hidden parts of themselves that they do not fully understand. Because of this, people often project those hidden parts onto others. In the beginning of love or connection, imagination feels safer than truth. Imagination allows control. It allows comfort. It allows a story to form without resistance. But truth does not follow imagination. Truth arrives on its own terms. And when truth enters a relationship, it often disrupts the emotional balance that projection created. Your soulmate may begin to feel emotionally overwhelmed when they finally see you more clearly. Not because you have changed, but because their understanding of you changes. They begin to realize that you were living a reality much deeper than the one they constructed in their mind. They see that your strength was not something obvious at first glance. It was built through experiences they never witnessed. They understand that your calmness was not emptiness, but emotional discipline formed through personal struggle. They begin to recognize that your patience was not waiting without thought, but conscious control developed over time. This realization can be intense, because truth does something unusual to people. It does not only reveal another person, it also reveals the observer. When someone finally sees you clearly, they are also forced to see their own misunderstandings. They begin to question their interpretations. They remember moments where they assumed things about you that were not accurate. They think about conversations where they misread your intentions. They revisit memories that now feel different because their awareness has changed. This is where emotional disruption begins. Not because truth is harmful, but because truth removes the comfort of illusion. Illusion gives people stability. It allows them to believe they understand what is happening. But truth introduces depth, and depth often feels unstable at first. Carl Jung often described relationships as mirrors. In this view, people do not simply meet others, they also meet themselves through others. When your soulmate looks at you deeply, they are not only seeing who you are, they are also seeing parts of themselves reflected back. They may realize that they admired your strength because they were not fully connected to their own. They may notice they were drawn to your calm presence because their own mind carried chaos. They may understand that your emotional depth triggered something within them that they had not yet explored. This is why deep connections often feel transformative. They are not only about bonding with another person, they are also about self-discovery. As truth becomes clearer, your soulmate may begin revisiting their memories with you. They might realize they misunderstood many of your actions. They might see that they reacted to their own expectations rather than your reality. They may understand that they were interacting with the version of you they created in their mind, not the full truth of who you are. This realization can feel uncomfortable because projection creates emotional safety. When someone believes they understand you completely, they feel secure. They feel in control. But when that illusion breaks, control disappears, and they are left with reality instead. Reality is more complex. It cannot be simplified into a single story. It contains layers, contradictions, emotions, silence, and depth that cannot be easily categorized. Carl Jung believed that relationships often begin with projection, but only survive through awareness. At some point, every meaningful connection reaches a turning point where a choice must be made. A person can hold on to the image they created, or they can accept the truth of who the other person actually is. Many connections fail at this stage because people become attached to their imagined version rather than the real individual. But deeper, more meaningful bonds grow stronger when illusion is released. When your soulmate begins to see you clearly, they may also begin to see themselves differently. They might question how they misunderstood you. They might wonder why they did not recognize your depth earlier. They may feel a mixture of regret, realization, and emotional awakening. They begin to understand that your value was never created by their recognition. You were already whole before they fully saw you. Your identity, your emotional world, your struggles, and your strength existed long before anyone acknowledged them. Their realization does not increase your worth. It only reveals what was already present. This is one of the deepest truths in human connection. Real value does not depend on being seen. It exists independently of recognition. Awareness only uncovers what was already there. True connection becomes rare because it requires both people to move beyond performance. It requires them to stop maintaining an image and instead accept authenticity. It requires emotional honesty, even when that honesty disrupts comfort. At a certain point, when illusion fully fades, a person may feel as if they are meeting you for the first time again. But this time, they are not meeting an image. They are meeting a real human being, with depth, history, emotion, and complexity. And in that moment, something important often happens. Their perception of the world shifts. Because when someone finally understands another person at a deep level, they also begin to question everything they thought they understood about connection itself. Carl Jung suggested that in the beginning, people often fall in love with an image rather than a person. The mind creates expectations based on fragments of information. It fills in gaps with assumptions. It builds a story that feels emotionally satisfying. People interpret silence as personality. They interpret attention as emotional commitment. They interpret distance as mystery. They interpret kindness as permanence. But none of these interpretations are guaranteed truth. They are mental constructions shaped by perception. When your soulmate first met you, they likely formed ideas about who you were almost immediately. They thought they understood your emotions, your intentions, and your identity. But what they were truly seeing was a combination of observation and imagination working together. Jung believed that every person carries unconscious emotional patterns. These patterns influence how they perceive others. Instead of recognizing these patterns within themselves, people often place them onto the individuals they become attached to. This is why misunderstandings in relationships are so common. People are not always reacting to the real person in front of them. They are reacting to their internal interpretation of that person. Over time, reality challenges these interpretations. Your soulmate may realize that the version of you they believed in was incomplete. They may discover that your quiet nature was not uncertainty but clarity. They may understand that your independence was not distance but self-respect. They may see that your emotional control was not lack of feeling but deep internal processing. As these realizations accumulate, the original image they created begins to dissolve. And when that image dissolves, emotional confusion can appear. Because people do not just lose an idea of someone else, they also lose a sense of certainty. And certainty is something the mind often depends on for emotional stability. But Jung believed that real growth begins when certainty is replaced with truth. Even if truth feels uncomfortable at first, it leads to a deeper form of understanding. At this stage, your soulmate may experience inner questioning. They may reflect on how often they misinterpreted you. They may realize that they responded based on assumption rather than awareness. They may see that their emotional reactions were shaped by incomplete understanding. And through this process, something powerful happens. They begin to see you not as a projection, not as a fantasy, but as a complete human being with depth that cannot be simplified. This is where real connection begins. Not in perfection, not in imagination, not in assumption, but in the moment, truth becomes stronger than illusion, and both people are still willing to remain present with each other. Because when someone finally discovers who you truly are, it often changes how they see everything around them. They may start to realize that they confused independence with distance, calm behavior with emotional coldness, and silence with absence. At first, everything they believed about you felt simple and easy to label. But now, something is shifting inside them. Old memories begin to return with new meaning. Small conversations they once ignored start to feel important. Moments they dismissed come back into their thoughts again and again, as if they are being pulled into focus. This kind of emotional awakening can feel overwhelming. It happens because real understanding removes emotional shortcuts. Before awareness, everything felt clear and easy to define. After awareness, everything becomes more complex. They begin to notice details they never cared about before. Your consistency becomes visible to them in a new way. Your emotional control becomes visible. Even your quiet depth, the parts of you they once overlooked, now become impossible to ignore. Carl Jung believed that real growth begins when the unconscious mind becomes conscious. In simple terms, transformation starts when hidden truths are finally seen and understood. Your soulmate may not realize that what they are feeling is not confusion or instability, but expanding awareness. They are not losing themselves. They are becoming more awake to something that was already there all along. Part of them wants to hold on to old assumptions because those assumptions feel safe and familiar. But another part of them understands they cannot return to that older version of reality anymore. Once truth enters awareness, pretending becomes harder and harder. It no longer feels natural. It no longer feels possible in the same way. This is one reason why meaningful connections leave such deep and lasting effects on people. They do not just bring comfort, they push people beyond comfort and into understanding. Your soulmate's emotional reaction is not always caused by dramatic events. Often, people change simply because they finally see someone clearly for the first time. They begin to recognize strength where they once expected weakness. They begin to recognize depth where they once assumed simplicity. They start to understand that what looked ordinary at first was actually carrying something far more meaningful underneath. And in that realization, something powerful happens. They discover that understanding another person is never only about that person alone. It also becomes a mirror. It reveals hidden parts of themselves they were not aware of before. This is why truth can feel so intense. This is why awareness can feel so emotionally strong. And this is why, after truly seeing you, they may never experience connection in the same way again. Carl Jung believed that relationships are not just emotional experiences between two individuals. He suggested that every meaningful connection becomes a mirror where hidden parts of the self begin to appear. Most people believe they enter relationships for comfort, understanding, or companionship. But often, they also enter relationships to discover themselves without realizing it. This is why certain people leave a deep impact, while others fade away quietly. Some connections awaken something that has been sleeping inside us. And once that part is awakened, it becomes very difficult to return to who we were before. When your soulmate begins to learn the truth about you, they may believe they are simply discovering your personality, your past, or your emotions. But in reality, they are also discovering parts of themselves at the same time. This is where emotional intensity begins. They start noticing feelings they previously ignored. They notice reactions inside themselves that feel stronger than expected. They become aware of thoughts that keep returning, even when they try to focus on something else. What they once thought was simple attraction begins to turn into reflection. They are not just reacting to you, they are reacting to what you awaken in them. Carl Jung explained that every human being carries hidden dimensions within their personality. Some parts are shown openly, while other parts remain hidden in the shadows. The shadow is not only darkness or negativity, it can also contain strength, courage, emotional depth, creativity, and qualities that a person has not fully accepted in themselves yet. When someone enters your life carrying those qualities naturally, it creates a powerful inner reaction. Your soulmate may see your calmness and suddenly realize how much noise exists inside their own mind. They may observe your patience and become aware of their own restlessness. They may notice your independence and start questioning their own need for external validation. What affects them is not only who you are, it is what your presence reveals about them. And this realization does not always come from big moments or dramatic conversations. Sometimes it comes quietly, through simple observation, through silence, through presence. At times, a person becomes unforgettable, not because of what they did, but because they opened a door inside us that we did not know existed. Your soulmate may begin to understand that your presence challenged their old beliefs about love, identity, and connection itself. They may realize that before meeting you, they viewed relationships mainly through comfort, stability, and certainty. But after meeting you, they begin to see relationships as something that can also bring growth, reflection, and transformation. Growth often begins with discomfort because awareness changes everything. Once someone sees a hidden part of themselves, they cannot fully unsee it. Your soulmate may start noticing patterns in their choices. They may see fears hidden inside their reactions. They may recognize desires they once ignored or pushed away. They may also see moments where they avoided emotional vulnerability, or times when they confused emotional control with emotional distance. Carl Jung believed that real connection does not happen when two perfect people meet. It happens when two people are willing to face what they reflect in each other. That reflection can feel intense because it asks for honesty. It asks for growth. It asks a person to stop running from themselves. So when your soulmate feels emotionally shaken after discovering the truth about you, it does not always mean they are falling apart. It may mean they are finally meeting themselves more clearly, through your presence, through your authenticity, and through the way you naturally exist. They begin to recognize parts of their own inner world that were waiting to be seen for a long time. And once this process begins, the connection is no longer just emotional, it becomes transformational. Authenticity leaves a lasting impact because it touches something deeper than attention ever can. Carl Jung believed that one of the greatest struggles in human life is becoming who we truly are instead of becoming who others expect us to be. Many people spend years trying to gain approval, recognition, or emotional security by adjusting themselves. They change their behavior to fit expectations. They hide their real thoughts to avoid rejection. They slowly build versions of themselves that are designed to be accepted by others. But this path slowly creates distance from the true self, and eventually, a moment comes when pretending becomes more exhausting than being real. Your soulmate may have believed that connection depends on constant attention, pursuit, communication, or visible affection. But when they learned the truth about you, they discovered something different. They realized your presence affected them not because you demanded attention, but because you remained aligned with yourself. You did not force understanding. You did not chase validation. You simply continued to be yourself, consistently and quietly. People may forget those who only entertained them for a short time, but they rarely forget those who helped them see truth in themselves. Authentic people become unforgettable because they give others permission to stop pretending. When someone meets a person who does not constantly seek approval, something begins to shift inside them. They start questioning their own masks. They begin to wonder how much of their life has been shaped by fear instead of truth. Carl Jung described this process as individuation. It is the journey of becoming whole by accepting all parts of the self instead of living through appearances. This journey is not easy. Authenticity does not always bring comfort. Sometimes it creates distance. Sometimes it leads to misunderstanding. Sometimes it requires standing alone for a while. But in the end, it leads to freedom. Your soulmate may begin to understand that your value was never dependent on being chosen. Your value came from knowing who you are, even when no one was watching or giving recognition. They begin to see that your calmness was not based on certainty about outcomes, but on trust in your identity. They realize your silence was not emptiness, it was confidence. They understand that your emotional depth existed whether it was noticed or not, because authenticity has a unique quality. It cannot be copied. Attention can be imitated, charm can be performed, attraction can be created artificially. But authenticity carries a presence that people feel even before they understand it fully. This is why your soulmate may feel emotionally shaken after seeing who you really are. They expected someone who needed to be understood. Instead, they met someone who already understood themselves on a deeper level. They expected dependence, but they found depth. They expected uncertainty, but they found clarity. They expected something ordinary, but they encountered something that challenged their entire understanding of relationships. Carl Jung believed that becoming your true self is not selfish, it is necessary. Because only those who understand themselves can create real and honest connections. Everything else becomes performance. So the lesson hidden in this connection is simple but powerful. You never needed to become someone else to be meaningful. You never needed to chase recognition to be remembered. The strongest presence is not created by demanding attention. It is created by living in truth. And when someone finally sees that truth in you, they realize something important. What moved them was never perfection. It was authenticity. In the end, the deepest truth about connection is not that someone finally discovered your value. It is that your value was always there, long before anyone recognized it. Carl Jung reminded us that meaningful relationships are never only about attraction or timing. They are experiences that reveal hidden worlds inside both people. Sometimes, someone enters your life thinking they understand you, only to later realize they had only seen a small part of who you are. And when that deeper truth appears, it does not only change how they see you, it changes how they see themselves. If your soulmate feels overwhelmed after understanding who you are, it is not because you suddenly became extraordinary. It is because authenticity breaks illusion and brings awareness to the surface. They begin to understand that your silence carried meaning, your distance carried growth, and your presence carried depth they did not recognize at first. What once felt ordinary now becomes unforgettable. But your journey was never meant to depend on their realization. Your purpose was never to chase understanding or force recognition. Your purpose has always been to become more honest, more whole, and more connected to yourself. Because real love, according to Jung's deeper ideas, does not begin when someone chooses you. It begins when truth replaces illusion and two people meet without masks. And maybe this is the final lesson hidden inside everything. The right person does not fall in love with an illusion. They are transformed when they finally see the truth of who you are. Some truths only capture attention, but real truth changes lives. So remain steady, remain real, and continue becoming yourself. Because those who are meant to understand your soul will eventually recognize that what they found in you was never ordinary. It was real.